In this video, Colonel Macgregor brilliantly analyzed the extent of US military power against Iran and how it affects not just US citizens, but the entire global population.
This makes any sort of compromise impossible. It makes an end to this conflict impossible. It gives the United States Armed Forces mission impossible because we're there to beat everyone else into submission. We can't do that.
Something the president said in his press conference today was, I tore up Barack Obama's Iranian nuclear deal because it disfavored Israel. Obama was choosing Iran over Israel. And why would you do that? I mean, I would do that at this point because Iran has not instigated a genocide before our very eyes in the last. So, you know, that curries favorably.
Well, your point is accurate. They've killed an awful lot of human beings. They've driven them from their homes.
And that's so what he said is, I had to choose Israel. I had to rejigger all of my politics, which led to this major conflict in the Middle East, because I needed to center Israel as a priority. I don't think there's any other way to see it, is there?
No, and I think he's put the global economic community on the road to a depression. It's only a matter of time until this depression strikes. Everybody thinks exclusively in terms of gasoline, but it's gasoline, it's diesel, it's plastics, it's fertilizer, it's feedstock. I mean, we just go down the list. All of these things are missing in the global south, and the global south is in enormous trouble. So is Japan. Japan is trying to put all of its nuclear reactors back online. They have a lot of work ahead of them, but they're doing it. And at the same time, they're burning whatever coal they can buy from wherever they can get it. The same thing is happening in Korea. All of these states that we're talking about, whether it's Korea, Japan, India, most of Southeast Asia, most of Africa, these states are not our enemies. Most of these states have good relations with us. We are harming our friends, and we're sending them all simultaneously to the poorhouse. Now, that also affects us. I mean, President Trump doesn't seem to understand that oil is a global commodity. So when the price rises in one place, it rises in other places. We're seeing it rise here. Right now in Germany, they're paying the equivalent of about $11 per gallon for gasoline. That's actually going to go up. The situation in Europe is dire, and people are now bidding for oil. So the tankers that might otherwise go to Europe that would ameliorate these conditions, they're not arriving because the Japanese, the Koreans, Indians, others can offer more money than the Europeans can for the energy. So the whole energy system in the world is being disrupted, and ultimately is going to have to be rebuilt, and it's going to take a decade or more. None of this seems to sink in. I think until the stock market crashes, and I think that it will, I don't know if it'll happen in 3 weeks or 3 months, but it's definitely going to tank.
Because we just heard from Ed Dowd. Ed Dowd just made a message from former BlackRock guy, and he basically said, hey, right now we're entering a phase where panic buying is going to become a reality. You're going to see, to your point about fertilizer shortages, all of these things. It's not just about gasoline prices. It's the wider spread. What you're seeing across the board, all through Southeast Asia right now. So how long until that starts trickling into Europe and into the United States?
Well, I think Europe is already crumbling. Germany in particular is just in the worst imaginable possible position. They've already been through this long process of deindustrialization because Biden decided to destroy the pipeline that brought them cheap energy from Russia. They can't do business anymore with Russia. Now they're dependent on external sources, and the pipelines that are reaching north are going to be cut off by the Iranians. What do you think happens when the Houthis finally cut off access to the Red Sea? All of this is going to combine to essentially bring the global economy to a halt. And as that begins to develop in a dramatic way and hits us here at home as well, I think President Trump's war is going to be ended involuntarily, ultimately. But he's going to be in a lot of trouble. If he continues on this route, I think he's going to be a potential victim of the 25th Amendment. People on the Hill are noticing it. We just had Senator Curtis, a Republican, who finally said, we should not continue with this war beyond 60 days unless we get a declaration of war. Well, hallelujah. He's absolutely right. It's a little late, I would argue, but thank God somebody's brought it up. Instead of attacking President Trump personally, which I think is a waste of time, people should stand up with Curtis, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, and make the same point. We're spending a lot of money over there. We're not getting much for our investment, in my judgment. So I think we need to bring this to a close somehow. Unfortunately, as I said before, we're committed to Israel's aims, and the Israelis have proven very resistant to any form of compromise.
We see these stories about like the doomsday planes. You see it with Netanyahu, and then nothing comes of it. Then you see this story here from the Daily Mail, just posted a few moments ago. Trump's doomsday plane spotted circling U.S. War Command Center as Iran rejects ceasefire. His emergency command aircraft currently circling above a U.S. base home to America's nuclear command center. The Night Watch Boeing E-4B made several loops above the Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska today. What do you make of this? Anything to make of this or nothing?
I hope not much, but it could be that the decision was made to do it at this point in order to send signals that they think are somehow or another going to intimidate the Iranians or anybody else. This sort of thing doesn't work. It never has. We have threatened so many people so often under President Trump. Every time he opens his mouth, he insults someone somewhere in a position of authority around the world. We've gotten to the point now where I think the answer to President Trump is going to be more resistance, more hostility, a greater readiness to fight. So I think, in addition to what I mentioned earlier on Tuesday, I think you will see the use of some ground forces in the Persian Gulf. And I think that will be done on the assumption that this is somehow or another going to pry loose the Gulf, but it can't, because you don't have to sit right in the middle of the Strait of Hormuz in order to stop things from moving through it. All you have to do is make it abundantly clear that you have tactical ballistic missiles and drones that can destroy anything that tries to move through it. And that can be done. And unless you can root out all of the strike systems within a few hundred miles inside Iran, unless you can stop or disrupt the communication between the satellites which provide the targeting data for the strike systems, nothing is going to change. And no one in their right mind is going to underwrite the shipping with insurance. So I don't know why he thinks that this can be done militarily, because I just don't see it working.
Something that Dan Davis has said on our show is that a nuclear weapon in Iran will be a nuclear weapon that affects Israel too. What do you think of that? Is there a precision nuke that I don't know about?
Well, nuclear warheads can be just as precise as conventional warheads, only at the detonation end, infinitely more destructive with long-term effects. And we know what those are. You can poison the atmosphere, poison the ground. You can set up people to die from all sorts of cancer for years afterwards. So that's the difference, and that's why we don't want anything to do with nuclear weapons. You end up destroying everything. There's no real strategic benefit to it unless your goal is to murder. And you see, this is why, frankly, I don't believe that President Trump would employ such a weapon, or anybody in the United States would do so, because I don't think our aim is to murder 1 million people in Iran. On the other hand, I do worry about Israel. All we have to do is listen to the things that they've said and see what they have done in various places. And they have unhesitantly murdered large numbers of people that they wanted to be rid of. So I do worry about the Israelis, and I don't see any evidence that we have any real influence over them. I only see influence going in one direction, from them to President Trump and his advisors.
I just want to come back to your military depth of knowledge and what this, when we look at ground troops, we look at, seems like the massive mobilization across the board here, multiple aircraft carriers now in this space. Maybe you could sort of game out what we're seeing and how you think this might unfold maybe over the next few days, Colonel.
Well, if you have, as they do right now in the Gulf, persistent surveillance, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, anywhere from 600 to 1,200 miles from Iran. In other words, just you draw a circle, and you go out from Iran's borders 600 to 1,000 miles. That means that you can see everything that is there. Potentially, given the weapons they have, their missile technology, that means that if you're American forces, whether you are at sea, in the air, on the ground at an airstrip or an airfield, or you are soldiers or Marines trying to move into the Persian Gulf, whether you fly in or however they manage to insert them, you are operating in a killing zone. That's what has to be understood. It's one giant killing zone.
And can you be specific?
All they have to do is look at the screen and find you, and you're done.
And before you go on, in that killing zone, what type of weapons does Iran still have access to? Are we talking hypersonics and others that they would be in that killing zone?
Oh, absolutely. You have tactical and you have theater ballistic missiles. An intercontinental ballistic missile does not exist in the Iranian inventory, contrary to what people are saying, nor do I think we're going to see one anytime soon. But certainly theater ballistic missiles that can fly 1,000 to 1,500 miles, yes, they exist, and they are precise, and they can be hypersonic. They can be unstoppable. But they can do the same thing with drones, albeit the drones will be slower, cheaper, but in far greater numbers, which is what we've seen repeatedly. And we have turned out to be very, very ineffective in our efforts to shoot these things down or stop them. That's the problem. And increasingly, Israel is almost defenseless. I don't know what their missile status is with regard to our weapons, the THAAD missiles or theater high altitude air defense missiles, PAC-3s or GEM-Ts or whatever they've got. But I don't think they have enough to cope with the Iranian threat. And the Iranians have proven and demonstrated repeatedly they'll penetrate, they'll get through, and they'll kill you. So my point is, how many Marines and how many soldiers can you airlift into the Persian Gulf area? Say you try to put them into UAE, you try to put them into Kuwait, you try to put them into Qatar, wherever you try to go, they're going to be identified. And then you have to move them from wherever you stage them to the islands that you're trying to seize in the Gulf. Now, I hope that somebody somewhere, and I'm sure somebody has, in the military has pointed this out. And you can't guarantee that they'll get through without being killed before they even arrive at their target destination. That's the problem.
In a minute, we're going to talk to Scott Ritter about the rescue mission over the weekend. The White House held an hour-long press conference today with Trump and other military leaders, including the CIA. I was confused why they were there. I want to ask you, what is the use value of doing something like that, a victory lapping a mission such as this? Because this may seem abundantly obvious, but you don't have to rescue people if you don't start wars. So why do you think they're doing this?
Well, remember, we go after pilots with a vengeance because you're asking pilots to potentially fly into enemy airspace. And if you expect them to do that, they have to have some assurance that if they're shot down, you will try to rescue them. In other words, we don't send pilots on suicide missions, say, good luck, may never see you again, hope you get through. No, we tell them, look, well, you do the best you can. We'll give you all the support we possibly can. And if we were able to do so, we will definitely extricate you. And we don't leave people behind unless we can absolutely not avoid it. So I think that's important. On the other hand, Scott may be able to tell you more than I can about the details of the special operations mission on the ground in Iran, which I think was aimed at trying to secure enriched uranium. Now, that would involve the CIA. You can't do any of that without the Central Intelligence Agency. The expertise for that sort of thing is there, and their ability to identify it, contain it, and remove it would have to be part of the mission. Yeah, obviously, it does not seem to have worked. Now, how many people were injured or killed, I have no idea. And again, we're back to what you were talking about at the beginning. we're not going to broadcast that. From the wreckage that we have been able to see, and I don't know if that's all the wreckage or just some of it. I haven't seen very many remains or corpses or anything, thank God. Were they removed by the Iranians? I don't know. But obviously it didn't work. And I think there were a lot of people in the Pentagon who made the point that this was the proverbial needle in the haystack. And the chances for success of that mission were always very low. So I think the president is probably going to turn his attention now to the other kinds of missions we discussed earlier. But we'll see.
Doug, before we let you go, I want to just get an assessment of what's happening inside of Tel Aviv, what's happening inside of Israel, and the attacks. We see videos that then have been later confirmed, and yes, we see neighborhoods on fire, but it's very difficult, as you know, to get information out of Israel. And those sources who are sort of speaking, well, it's almost like it reminds me of the Leslie Nielsen from Naked Gun. He's standing there literally on the phone with, so you can hear missiles going off in the background. It's all fine, nothing to see here, and you can hear like explosions in the background. First, on the Israel side, how are things looking there? What is Iran's ability to penetrate the Iron Dome, the other systems, and then also the Lebanon piece of this and the destruction of neighborhoods across southern Lebanon? So maybe you could just unpack both of those pieces and where things stand there.
Well, starting with southern Lebanon, it's pretty obvious that the effort in southern Lebanon is to Gazify it, to essentially repeat in southern Lebanon what they've done in Gaza. There's also evidence that there's an interest in doing some of that on the West Bank, although it's not as intensive. The bottom line is that they thought, or at least they insisted, that Hezbollah had been put out of action. Hezbollah is absolutely not out of action. And Hezbollah has managed to launch a lot of rockets into northern Israel. Especially the people in northern Israel are very unhappy. They've made that abundantly clear politically. Many of them have been evacuated. Lots of Israelis have left. Now, where have they gone? I'm told Cyprus, Greek islands, even all the way to Serbia in some cases and elsewhere. I think Israel is on the knife edge of serious internal disruption. Their government is suppressing dissent. It has to right now. I think Mr. Netanyahu, and I don't know where he is, I have absolutely no idea where he is, but I think he and his government are hard pressed to hold things together. I don't think the Iron Dome is very effective anymore. I don't know how effective it was to begin with. It was never as advertised. And as we were talking earlier, how many missiles have they got? Anti-missile missiles. I don't think there are very many left. As I've watched a number of these strikes that have been filmed and then disseminated to the West, you don't see much response to incoming missiles anymore. If there is any, it's very modest, in many cases, none at all. I think Israel's in a lot of trouble. But remember, Israel has an opportunity in the minds of Mr. Netanyahu and his government that they may not have again, and that is absolute unconditional support from the United States. They have real control over the decision makers in Washington, and they want to exploit that to achieve their larger aims, which are not just to subdue Iran, but to establish their supremacy across the region and to dominate the region to the point where they can expand their borders as they see fit or will. This makes any sort of compromise impossible. It makes an end to this conflict impossible. It gives the United States Armed Forces mission impossible because we're there to beat everyone else into submission. We can't do that. It's beyond our resources and our capabilities.
And finally, Doug, how devastated is Iran right now?
Well, I think they've certainly suffered some serious civilian casualties. Thousands of people have been killed. How many thousands, we don't know. Now, Alistair Crook, who has better access to the Iranian government and people in Iran than I do, seems to think that the Iranians thus far have actually sustained fewer casualties than they did during the 12-day war, that they evacuated promptly into shelters. They got people away. They had alternatives to existing hospitals because the Israelis had destroyed a lot of hospitals and aid stations. That was done early on. They seem to have expected that, so they were prepared for it. They seem to have weathered it pretty well. Now, I don't know what President Trump has up his sleeve, but based upon what he's saying, I guess we should expect the worst. And I think the Iranians are preparing for that. And again, the key point is this is a continental power half the size of India with 93 million people. They will take the damage. They will absorb the punishment, just as the Soviets absorbed enormous punishment in the past during World War II and during the invasion of Russia by Napoleon. They are a large area, a large population. They can't protect everything, so they don't try. They accept the fact that they're going to sustain damage. I think the Israelis have done that. But they also know how to mobilize their population and get them out there. And that's what happened with our special ops mission. My impression is that most of the people that did the fighting, and many of those who were probably killed, were actually local militia as opposed to part of a regular military force. So they're prepared. And I think they'll take whatever punishment is dished out and they will counterstrike. They will counterattack. Now, the final thing, and nobody mentions this, we have to keep this in mind. The Russians, the Chinese, the Turks, the Pakistanis, others are on the sidelines. They are watching this unfold. They are prepared to act at some point. They will not let this go on in perpetuity. And the pressure from the rest of the world to do something to stop us is going to become overwhelming. The Egyptians, they have the largest army in the region. They're the largest Muslim Arab state in the region. They are on a knife edge there. Sisi is in an unfortunate position. He doesn't want to attack right now, but he's under tremendous pressure from his population to act against the Israelis. He's got 100 million people there who are ready to fight. They're angry as hell. He might not last. I don't think most of the Arab governments that we see today will be there in a few months. So the entire region is going to go through dramatic turnover.
Wow.
Because you think the will of the Arabic population is to stop another Gaza from happening and has been all along. Yes. I mean, it's a source of great frustration that was allowed to happen while so many powerful leaders sat on their hands.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Well, and so many corrupt Egyptians who are making millions of dollars off of building concentration camps in Rafah, and who are really cleaning up on the black market and making so much money off of what will become this massive refugee crisis pouring into these concentration camps that they made all this money off of. So,
and the ruling classes in the Gulf states, many of them are living in Egypt right now. Mm-hmm. They fled the area. They're sitting in Egypt. The Egyptian population is not oblivious to this. They're well aware of it. Remember, we were instrumental in preventing the Muslim Brotherhood from seizing power. But the reason the Muslim Brotherhood came to power initially in Egypt was very simply because of the corruption that you're discussing. They're aware of it. They're sick of it. They're angry about it. That's why most of the Arabs in the Muslim Arab world don't have much use for the ruling elites in the Arabian Peninsula. They are seen as, quote unquote, the fat and the corrupt. We have been backing all of these people for years. So you can imagine how popular we are.
Right. And so I don't want to extrapolate too much here, but it's very possible that in the United States, anyone who does not support Israel will become a desirable candidate for future elections because we see it, because there's a national frustration at AIPAC co-opted politicians. And that could also happen in the Gulf regions, you say, which would be international, which would be an implosion of Israel's global support.
Yes, I think that's true. And I think you also have to extend some of this to Europe, because you have European leaders who are co-conspirators in the war that we are waging. But more important, they've utterly failed to protect their own populations. Remember, when you're the leader of a country, you're supposed to shelter, feed, and protect your people. What has happened in Europe? They're not being sheltered. They're not going to have enough to eat. They're not going to be able to power their systems, heat their homes, protect themselves, run hospitals. All hell is going to break loose in Europe, too. We've been waiting for this. You and I and others, we've talked about the problems in Europe. Well, I think all of this is going to suddenly come to fruition.
What do you think happens militarily next about the Strait of Hormuz?
Militarily, I think he's going to do exactly what he says, and the Air Force will go in along with Naval Air, and they will deliver a punishing series of strikes designed to destroy petrochemical plants, energy infrastructure, and anything that provides power and support to the government. There's no question about that. Again, will it be successful? I don't think it's going to make much difference. You're talking about a continental power. We're a maritime and aerospace power. That's why we don't maintain a large army. We don't need to. We have oceans around us. Iran is a continental power. That's why it has 1 million men under arms inside the country. That's why it's invested heavily in this ISR strike paradigm, which is to link satellites and space-based intelligence and surveillance collection to strike systems. What they will do after Trump completes his mission on Tuesday night or whenever he decides to start it, you got to take these deadlines with a grain of salt. He's not always completely honest about that. And what you may get is something earlier, who knows? But if it happens, the Iranians are going to respond. And they've already said what they will do. And I find that far more upsetting than anything we're going to do, because they're going to destroy everything of a similar quality in terms of energy infrastructure and power plants, and potentially, I don't know if we hit the desalination plants or not, but if we rob the country of power, I suppose desalination won't work anyway. But the Iranians can turn around and do that to the entire western coast of the Persian Gulf. And I think that will finish off the Gulf states. They have almost 67 million people living in that region that runs from Oman all the way up to Kuwait and southern Iraq. They won't be able to sustain themselves. They won't be able to drink water. They won't have any power. Now, I don't know how many are still there, but I think that's kind of a death sentence for those Gulf states, and probably also Saudi Arabia, which is why I think they have been pleading with President Trump to do something else, to begin thinking differently. But this is something I wanted to add today that I think is very important. We need to understand that Israel's demand for this thing called Greater Israel, for more territory in Lebanon and Syria, ultimately Iraq, even at the expense of Jordan and Saudi Arabia and the Sinai and part of Egypt beyond the Nile, all of this forbids a Palestinian state, and it makes compromise with Iran, with any of the Muslim countries in the region, impossible. And ultimately, that's what we're fighting for, because the whole purpose of our war is to essentially achieve Israeli goals. We have no territorial aims in the region. Our only interest historically was really in the oil and the 47 products around the world that oil produces, that petroleum is part of. But we have no interest in the territory there. But we're being asked to underwrite that expansion. And at the same time, we're being asked to make the region submissive to Israel. In other words, to subordinate everyone there to whatever Israel wants. I don't see that happening. I don't think the populations of the region will go along with that. I don't think they ever will go along with it. And I don't think the military is the right instrument to help Israel improve its position in the region. So everything that you're hearing right now is essentially a verdict on Israel and its destruction. It makes Israel's failure inevitable. There is no chance for them to achieve what they want. We can't make it happen. We don't have the military power to do it. We can't open that strait. That's the whole problem. Can't be done.